Let me say it as simply as I can. Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
Yeah, you have to understand something, the way Washington works here, okay?
Have you spoken to Secretary Napolitano about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken with Secretary Clinton about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken to President Obama about Fast and Furious?
I don't think that I have. I see the president.
That's okay. If you haven't, you haven't. Have you spoken to the President of Mexico about Fast and Furious?
No.
Have you spoken to the Attorney General of Mexico about Fast and Furious?
I don't believe so.
We have 50-plus members of Congress calling for your resignation over this, and you've never spoken to any one of these people about this operation.
Now, my question is the U.S. involved with any procuring of weapons, transfer of weapons, buying, selling, anyhow transferring weapons to Turkey out of Libya?
To Turkey? I will have to take that question for the record. Nobody's ever raised that with me. Well, Senator, you'll have to direct that question to the agency that ran the annex.
You're saying you don't know?
I do not know. I don't have any information on that. And
correct.
There might be many reasons you would be at the White House. What would be some of the reasons you might be at the White House?
The Easter egg roll with my kids. Yeah, I mean, just so I'm clear, I have no memory.
And that's why people are wondering if you're being square with us today, because you said you could assure everyone, the American people in the Congress then, that nothing was going on. And the gentleman sitting beside you just issued a report last week that says what you told the Congress, what you told the American people a year ago, is absolutely wrong. How many times did you go to the White House?
Many times around budget and policy matters of tax and other things like that.
Got a number? Any idea?
I don't have a number.
We just looked at the White House log. Now, we couldn't get 2012, but in 2010 and 2011, 118 times you were at the White House. I mean, that's a lot. I bet these Democrat members of Congress and this administration haven't been there close to that many times. 118 times you were at the White House, 132 members of Congress contact you about this information, 42 major news stories about this very subject, and you told Congress a year ago, I can give you assurances, nothing is going on. Everything's wonderful. We're not targeting conservative groups. You sure you didn't talk to anyone at the White House about this issue, Mr. Shulman?
About singling out conservative groups for special scrutiny?
Well, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
I'm absolutely sure I did not talk to anyone.
118 visits. It didn't come up in a casual conversation after 132 members of Congress contacted you about it. You sure you didn't bring it up with anybody at the White House?
Not to my memory, and it wouldn't be appropriate.
I got to get to the IRS because I don't know what happened there, and I'm hoping maybe you can tell us. Douglas Shulman, former IRS chief, he was cleared into the White House 157 times, more than any of your cabinet members, more than any other IRS guy in the history by far. Okay, why was Douglas Shulman here 157 times? Why?
Mr. Shulman, as the head of the IRS, is constantly coming in because at the time we were trying to set up the healthcare.gov, and the
what
IRS,
did he have to do with that?
The IRS is involved in making sure that that works as part of the overall healthcare team.
So it was all healthcare?
Number two, we've also got the IRS involved when it comes to some of the financial reforms to make sure that we don't have taxpayer-funded bailouts in the future. So you had all these different agendas in which the head of the IRS is naturally involved.
Did you speak to him a lot yourself?
I do not recall meeting with him in any of these meetings that are pretty routine meetings.
Okay, so you don't recall seeing Shulman, because what some people are saying is that the IRS was used at a local level in Cincinnati, maybe other places, to go after.
Absolutely wrong.
But how do you know that? Because we still don't know what happened there.
Bill, we do. That's not what happened. Folks have, again, had multiple hearings on this. I mean, these kinds of things keep on surfacing, in part because you and your TV station will promote them.
But
when folks actually
there are unanswered questions?
Bill, when you actually look at the stuff, there have been multiple hearings on it. What happened here is that you've got a 501c4 law that people think is confusing. That the folks did not know how to implement.
Okay.
Because it basically says,
So you're saying
if
there was
you're
no
involved,
corruption there at all? No.
That's not what I'm
Flat.
saying. That's actually...
No, but I want to
the
know what you're
hearing-
saying. You're the leader of the country.
Absolutely.
You're saying no corruption?
No.
None.
No, there were some boneheaded decisions out of a
but
local
no mass
office.
corruption.
Not even mass corruption, not even a smidgen of corruption, I would
Okay.
say.
Do you have a legal judgment on whether it would be constitutional to kill a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil in those circumstances?
A person who is not engaged, as you've described. Again, this is the problem with hypotheticals. But the way in which you have described this person sitting at the cafe, not doing anything imminently, the use of lethal force would not be appropriate, would not be something...
I find it remarkable that you still will not give an opinion on the constitutionality. Let me move on to the next topic because we...
When the White House conducted their armed drone strikes in North Africa, particularly in eastern Libya, prior to the attack on our mission in Benghazi on 9/11 last year, did the White House notify the State Department of the armed drone strikes before they were made?
Armed drone strikes in Libya? I'm unknowing of such, and I would defer to the White House.
Ever get the message that said they could not withstand a sustained attack on the consulate? I was tracking that intelligence. I was tracking through General. Did you receive that information? I did, and I saw it. So it didn't bother you? It bothered me a great deal. But why never received the forces in place to be ready to respond? Because we never received a request to do so, number one, and number two, we never heard of Ambassador Stevens' repeated warnings about the lack. I had, sir, through General Ham, but we never received a request for support from the State Department, which would have allowed us to put forces on the State Department's fault. I'm not blaming the State Department. I'm sure they had their own assessment. Who would you blame? Sorry, sir? Who is responsible then? It was clear that an assessment was made that they could not withstand a sustained attack on the consulate, with it being September 11th and many other indications that are on that board over there of various attacks that have already taken place. I stand by the report of the Accountability Review Board. But
Ma'am, with all due respect, President Obama's foreign policy is an extension of President Bush's foreign policy. If there's any difference at all, President Obama is killing more people overseas than President Bush ever did.
But the way to make a government responsible is not simply to enlist the services of responsible men and women or to sign laws that ensure that they never stray. The way to make government responsible is to hold it accountable. And the way to make government accountable is to make it transparent so that the American people can know exactly what decisions are being made, how they're being made, and whether their interests are being well served.
Obama isn't funny. The Republicans are always saying to me, oh, you don't make fun of Obama. He's not funny. And he's not. He speaks in paragraphs. That's difficult. And the problem is that he is so inside his own head. He thinks so much that I believe he's forgotten that we're here.
I have certain rules I live by. My first rule, I don't believe anything the government tells me. Nothing.